it's Leah from My Sewing Room. Today we are going to be making Shelly Smola's Cars on the Go car carrier, and with a little touch of At the Track, which is her quilt car mat. Lots of great gifts for little boys or girls. These, I'm sure everybody's tripped over them in their house, and kids want to take all of them with them when they go places when they're about 4. And then, God forbid, you lose their favorite car. Like, it all goes so downhill and there's big tears. So the thing I'm going to show you guys how to make is called the Cars to Go Carrier. It is an embroidery file set of designs from a lady named Shelly Smola Designs. Her stuff is really, really fun. Some of you have seen the periodic table that hung out in the background of a whole bunch of our videos for quite some time. That's also by Shelly Smola, and I'm loving her stuff. So she's got the Cars to Go Carrier, which has pockets. I'm going to show you pockets on Thursday, but we'll show you road stuff today because it's easier to start with. And then she also has a quilt that coordinates with it. So I pulled some of the blocks from the quilts. And we'll stitch one of those today and show you guys how to attach some sashing and how to trim these blocks. So we're going to embroider and make another block for the quilt. So I made a few yesterday, and these are little 4-inch blocks. The Cars to Go Carrier itself has 5-inch blocks, but depending on what size of hoop you have for your machine, there's so many fun road configurations. I ran out of green fabric at home, so we had to change what we were doing when we made the smaller roads. So there's pawns, and they can be connected to each other. Both the quilt and the car carrier have instructions for other layouts. So many fun roads. So that's from the quilt. And in the pattern, she gives you layout blocks that you can play around with and lay out before you start making blocks. Because the way I would probably do this is I would make a whole lot of everything and then let kids lay it out and let them build the road for their own quilt. Because I like this corner. That's the corner I want to drive on. So really, really fun. I want to make more. So we're gonna make a block because they're really, 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 really easy embroideries to do. So I've hooped polymesh stabilizer, and I'm gonna use a Bernina B79 today because it's a sweet little machine, and it has a good hoop size, so you can do some of the bigger designs for this. So you could do the bigger quilt blocks, but the hoops handle really, really nicely. They've got a locking mechanism, so if you don't like tightening screws, the locking mechanism on this hoop is awesome. And to hoop this, we're going to lay the inner hoop on top of the stabilizer and set it down inside, nice and flat. And then this lovely hoop has a latch. So quick and painless. It's lovely. So on the Bernina 79, it's the similar interface to the Berninas. So right now, when I turn the module on, it goes and gives me the option of opening designs on the machine or on the USB stick. Right now, my designs are on the USB stick. It's in this fancy folder here. And this reads EXP format files. And I think I was going to make a straight road, but that doesn't sound very fun now. I think I'm going to make a curve. Need another corner. We'll make a plain corner. We'll let the design load. And in this design, when we start looking at the colors that are included, it has a placement line, a tack down line, placement line, cutting line, and all of these things. I'll explain them as we stitch them, but really super easy embroidery. We'll let the arm move to its starting position. And And then we'll slide our hoop in. So we're starting with just the stabilizer. Once that is latched in place, latched in all the way, we can hit go. So the very first thing in stitching is just a placement line for where you're going to put your batting and your background fabric. And it allows us to stop and trim the threads if there was a thread at the beginning that needed to be trimmed. So after our first piece or stitch is down, that's our placement line for where our fabric's going to land. And like I said, I ran out of fabric at home, so now we have some crazy green stuff. Looks more like a swamp with lily pads in it. And all we want to do is make sure that our batting and fabric are kind of roughly even over that square. I cut the batting on this 4x4 block at 5x5, which is pretty generous. And on screen, it's showing this is red. You don't have to stitch this in the color shown on screen. It's really just breaking it up so that you know which is your placement line. And no fingers in the hoop, but I forgot tape. So the next item on screen is a placement line for our road fabric. So it's just a black outline. I'm actually just going to do that in green. I'll be able to see it when I put my black fabric down. And I can change the thread in a moment. So like most machines, cut your thread at the spool and pull the thread out needle direction when you're rethreading. Your machine will be much happier. Then I've got a really big cone of black thread. So it's gonna ride on the thread stand over there. And then we're also gonna place our applique fabric at the same time. So the best way to do this is to actually pull it out of the hoop, or pull the hoop off the machine so you know you have your fabric covered, your spot covered. So the green outline here that you guys can hardly see on camera, we're going to cover that with black fabric. And right now it's generous. And this time there is a little thread to trim. We're good. So this step, we don't want all that extra black fabric. We just want our curved road piece. So we're gonna just move over and trim on a flat cutting surface. So I'm using, these are my favorite scissors for trimming applique, the 6-inch double curved. I embroider on multi-needle at home and my hoops are deeper. So this big curve gets in over the edge of that, much better. And Shelly's instructions say to leave that black fabric in the seam allowance for the block, which is why I'm leaving tails over there. So the next stitch is that little tail. That's why the machine stops. So we can trim it out and not have weirdness as we get started. Doesn't read my mind. This is just a satin stitch finish over the edge of the applique. Okay, and the next fancy color is the white dashed line down the middle of the road. And if you wanted this to be a pathway or something different, do a different color of thread. There's no rules that say you have to follow exactly what's in the pattern. This is definitely something where without an embroidery machine you can make something similar. The embroidery machine sure makes all that applique really, really easy. Her patterns don't, they aren't printable in a way that would be easily translated to doing it without an embroidery machine. We have just one color left. We're going back to the green we used at the beginning. We'll do the background stitching in the grass. It's probably gonna look really crazy on this fabric. Part of the reason for trimming your thread tails is you don't want to stitch your foot to your fabric. It'll make your machine rather grumpy, which will probably make you rather grumpy. Embroidering. So the next thing we'll need to do is trim this down. And I didn't think to bring one from home that's in use, but trimming a whole lot of these blocks gets rather cumbersome after a while. So Olfa makes these great things called rotating cutting mats. Huge fan. Huge fan. If you're trimming lots and lots and lots of blocks like this, you might want one. So there's a really big one, 17 inches. And then there's a smaller one at 12 inches. There might be a smaller one than that yet, but it's not in the display, so I don't actually know. There's one that's about 7 inches. But the way these work is if you were to be cutting these blocks and trimming them down, I have a ruler the same size as what I want the finished block to be. If you're setting up to trim this, we're using, I'm going to trim this from the back, it'll be easier to see what I'm doing. You're using the stitch line on here to trim these down. And Shelly's directions say to trim 1/4 inch away from all those lines. I found that it was just much easier to go a little wider in my cut. And so it's about 3/8. But then I could use a square 4.5 by 4.5 or 5.5 by 5.5 ruler, which was much easier than trying to wiggle and shift. So on a regular cutting mat, to cut all the way around this, you can easily cut that direction away from yourself. You can easily cut that direction away from yourself. And at this point, you should pick your block up and turn it around, because not many people can cut. You shouldn't cut that way. You're going to cut your thumb off. That would be bad. And then we're going to keep that closed. So you would have to pick it up and turn it and realign your ruler, which is totally, totally doable. When you start doing, I think the periodic table that I did had, the second one had 320 blocks in it. I lost steam really quick for doing that way. So the rotating cutting mat, what you'll be able to do is set your block on the cutting mat, but then you can line up your ruler, make your first cut here and your second cut there. And then the mat is a 2-layer mat, so you can turn it, make another cut, turn it, make your last cut. It's pretty slick. So let me show you guys how to sew a pair of these together. So the other thing you should do, based on her instructions, she said to just make long strips of sashing to go in between. So I've already done the in-between sashing on these blocks. You'll be a whole lot more accurate if you trim your sashing to size and use clips or pins. These little ones, I'm okay. And I cut mine just a little wider because I left my seam allowance wider. So I cut my sashing at 1 1/4 instead of 1 1/8. And if it's starched ahead of time, it's much easier to work with. So we'll sew the first side on, and then you would press it open to do the second side. And on this particular machine, when you want to go back to sewing mode, you have to pull the embroidery arm off. So the machine knows I'm still on a straight stitch plate, which is just fine for what I'm doing. And this foot is wider, so it's going to allow me to keep a wider seam allowance because there's seam allowance lines on the machine. I've been using a 3/8 seam allowance because that worked well with what I'm sewing on at home for my regular foot. So first side of sashing goes on there. Then we can find whatever road piece we're going to attach to that. Do we attach that one? Sure. And then I like sewing with that sashing on top. Just personal preference. So now we have road attached to road. You just have to jump over the grass and the crack in the road. Your cars might not do it, but your kids certainly will. I don't know what kind of road pieces I'm going to attach into those yet, but that's okay. So the road is super fun to sew together. There's longer sashing pieces. Same thing, you're going to measure. I forgot to bring a ruler, like a quilting ruler. You're going to measure how long your piece is and make sure it's the right length. So the sashing pieces between the sections of road go together the same way. One side, then the other. I think that's how this road goes together. So that'll magically have some sashing sewn into it next time everybody sees it. But that's what we're doing this week. We're doing a little bit of road construction. So thank you guys for joining me. We'll do day 2 of this on Thursday, and got something else planned for tomorrow. And then we're back to road construction. Because just when you think you know what the roads are doing, they're going to change again. But we're going to sew pockets for your little toy cars. So thanks, guys. Be safe, be kind, be calm, and we will see you tomorrow.